Okay, it's time to do some grafting. Right, so I've been working on my Christmas socks using Yuletide by West Yorkshire Spinners, and I've now worked my toes and I'm ready to finish off. Normally I knit my socks toe up, so I don't normally have to graft the toes, but grafting is useful for seams as well. If you don't want to do a 3-needle bind off, this is a good way to do seams. Or if you need to add length, so you've had to cut your knitting and you want to add some length in, you can graft things together that way. So it is a useful technique to know, but it is one that just sort of floats out of the memory quite easily. So we're going to do some grafting of the toes on these socks. So I'll flip the camera around in a sec so you get a better view of what I'm doing. We're going to be using a grafting technique that's also known as Kitchener stitch. Some people don't like to use that term because of various associations with Lord Kitchener himself, but you will sometimes see it referred to as kitchen stitch, sometimes referred to as grafting. I actually have a sock ruler that I use quite a lot for measuring my socks as I'm working them that handily has Kitchener stitch, if it'll focus, on the ruler itself. You can also get key rings to hang off project bags and that sort of stuff. So I mean, it's useful having some sort of reference so that if it does just float away and it's hard to call to mind, that you've got somewhere to go and look up how to do it. Okay, so without further ado, let's flip the camera around and get these socks finished up. Okay, so it's been a little while since I've done any overhead filming like this, so I'm going to do my best to keep everything in shot for you. But we're going to be working on these socks. I've already cut my yarn. You want to make sure you've got a good length of yarn where you stop knitting, ready to graft to do this. It's a sewn technique. You'd use it for some of the sewn bind offs, like Italian circular Italian round bind off, the one that sort of curves over the end. This is essentially the same technique. So yeah, there's lots of uses for grafting. This is just one of them. So I'm going to thread my needle with the cut yarn. A good rule of thumb, if you're not sure how long to leave your yarn, is at least 3 times the length of the seam. But obviously on toes, that's still not very much yarn. So leave a good amount of yarn so that you've got enough to thread your needle and it's not going to sort of pop out part way through. The first thing we need to do is a bit of a setup. So we're going to get the front and back stitches lined up with our needles parallel to each other. We're just going to set up on the first 2 stitches. So we're going to take our darning needle. I like to use these ones with a bent end, so I find it a bit easier. And we're going to go purlwise through the front stitch, leaving it on the needles. And then we're going to go knitwise through the stitch on the back needle and leave it on the needle. So that's your setup. Now we're going to get into a bit of a rhythm. So we're going to go through the stitch on the front needle knitwise and take it off the needle, and we're going to go purlwise through the next stitch on the front, leave it on the needle, purlwise and off at the back, and then we're going to go through the needle at the back, knitwise, and leave it on the needle. So knitwise off, purlwise on, and then back, purlwise off. This is where the bent needle comes in handy, knitwise on. And we're going to do that all the way across the seam. Knitwise off, purlwise on, purlwise off, knitwise on. So now that we're on find the last stitches of that seam, knitwise off, purlwise off, pull the yarn through, and we're ready to take this end through to the inside of the sock and weave in our ends. I do have a little bit of a blip here, that's just a tension issue, so you can always shuffle around with your stitches to get them evened out a little bit more, but I'm not going to worry about it because it will even out in the wear. It's not too much of an issue, it's not a big hole in there. It's essentially where I split the yarn with one of my purl offs and tried to fix it. So I just mess up the tension a little bit there, but yeah, it's fine. It won't affect the wear at all. So I'm going to do the same on the other sock and get the yarn on the inside ready to weave away. And we'll take a look once I've finished both. Just like pop on, well, now that I've put this first sock on the sock blocker, you can actually see how that tension has just evened itself on the sock blocker itself. So yeah, nothing to worry about if you've got a little bit of unevenness in the seam at the toe of the sock. Besides, it's going to be inside your shoe, no one's going to see it. Okay, so that is both toes on my socks grafted. Nice smooth end to the toe despite the slight hiccups with tension. I find that happens quite a lot with grafting toes. It's something about the shorter seam and me. You may not have the same issue because it may be a me thing. Longer seams I find easier to adjust the tension as I'm going. There's more scope for rearranging stitches and what have you, but I do find with socks that they don't really matter so much with the unevenness. It just blocks itself out as you're wearing them. So yeah, it's really not anything to worry about. All that's left to do now with these socks is weave in the ends. So I've got ends from the cuffs, the heels and the toes, and this sock's got extra heel ends because I ran out of the red. But yeah, the pattern that I've used for these is Tom Bombadil. I will put the information in the description box down below if you're interested. I do like the chevron effect around the back of the legs. It has a cable down the front, which is, to be fair, a little bit lost in this yarn, but that's to be expected. So yeah, so I just need to weave the ends in and check they fit, which is always an issue with top down because I am more familiar with knitting toe up, so I have my recipe down for knitting toe up. Top down, we'll see. They should be fine. I've done the measurements. They should be fine. They fit on the sock blockers as well, and they're about the right size for my feet. So, but yeah, so that's those done. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I look forward to seeing you in my next video. In the meantime, there's this one here that may be of interest to you, and I will see you soon. But until then, happy crafting and bye-bye for now.